Adaptations of video game stories have a reputation for being very low quality. For every enjoyable, if mediocre film like the original Resident Evil, Mortal Kombat, or Silent Hill, we get absolute train wrecks like Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Over the last few years, Netflix of all companies has proven that good adaptations of popular game properties are actually possible, in the form of the recent adaptation of The Witcher, and even before that, the stylish, brutal, Western anime adaptation of Castlevania. Castlevania is a series which has been around a long time, with the first 3 games releasing on the original Nintendo Entertainment System. The series has spanned multiple console generations, but hit a major milestone in 1997 with the release of Koji Igarashi's masterpiece, Symphony of the Night. Igarashi did a run of similar games on Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS, but apart from the non-canon Lords of Shadows games, the series has been more or less MIA since then, until producers Kevin Coldy, Adi Shankar, and writer Warren Ellis got their animated series onto Netflix in 2017. While I quite enjoyed The Witcher, thought Sonic was an enjoyable kids film, will always have a soft spot for the original Mortal Kombat, and will always be happy about the first Resident Evil film opening with Milla Jovovich naked on a bathroom floor, the Castlevania animated series is by far the best motion picture adaptation of a video game property. The first season is only 4 episodes long, with the first episode being a prologue telling the story of Dracula falling in love with his wife, who would become the mother of Symphony of the Night protagonist Alucard, and spoiler alert, the events which would lead to Dracula declaring a genocide against the human race. From there, we pick up at the beginning of Castlevania III Dracula's Curse, in which players in the game and the audience of the show follow Trevor Belmont as he recruits allies and fights against Dracula's forces. Joining him on his quest is the magician Sypha Belnades, who is a member of an order called the Speakers, who pass knowledge down through the generations via oral tradition. They speak to each other, you see.
But it's not just a clever name.
Luckily, one of the traditions Sypha picked up on was the magic she uses in combat. At the end of Season 1, Alucard joins the party, and the stage is set for the real meat of the story thus far, which is explored in Season 2. Season 1 is tight and action-packed, with the only real downside to it being that it might give people the wrong idea of what the series would turn out to be. Castlevania is essentially a straight-up action game with very thin, but very present narrative elements, so the heavy action of Season 1 is very much in keeping with the games. Season 2, on the other hand, pumps the brakes and shifts the focus away from flashy anime action to slow, character-led storytelling. This is the aspect that will gain or lose many people. If you expected to be tuning into a balls-to-the-wall, hyper-violent action show, you may hit Season 2 and wonder what show you're watching. However, if you're up for a deliberately paced show with lots of solidly written dialogue and character development, which explodes into incredible action towards the end of each season, not unlike the glory days of Game of Thrones, then Castlevania is the best dark fantasy show on the air right now. Season 3 continues this trend and amps it up. With the main arc of the first 2 seasons concluded, Season 3 is divided into a few distinct stories with a bit of overlap. Alucard's arc is essentially in a bubble, dealing with him training 2 Japanese warriors in the art of vampire slaying, while dealing with his own isolation and depression. This is where the main point of controversy from this season has been coming from, involving a certain ménage à trois, but my advice is to step back and look at what's actually happening. It's a 2-guy, 1-girl threesome, Alucard does engage in some rather risque homosexual activity, and a bunch of people have their panties in a bunch over it. I'd just like to remind everyone that Alucard's sexuality was never explicitly mentioned in the games, and he's a very androgynous vampire. Al being cool with a little bisexual recreation shouldn't ruin the character for anyone. Our boy just likes to party, let him play a play. Plus, the female warrior is high-class waifu material. Trevor and Sypha, now an official and rather adorable couple, kick off the season with an awesome action sequence before beginning a slow burn story about a cloister of monks in a small town who may be up to something nefarious. Not a lot of character development happens for Trevor and Sypha this season, but the mystery and new characters which it involves are intriguing, and it culminates in action which will make fans of the first season nod in approval. The final 2 arcs deal primarily with characters who were both introduced in Season 2, Hector and Isaac. These characters are the protagonist and antagonist of the PlayStation 2 game Castlevania Curse of Darkness, and both are necromancers, which in this universe are referred to as Forge Masters. Hector's arc deals with him as a prisoner to the frequent game villain Carmilla, and his long conversations with the adorable vampire Lenore. This is probably the weakest story of the season, which is a bit of a shame as I do like Hector and I thought he would be up to something more interesting this time around. He and Lenore do have good chemistry, and I think it's setting up to be something really awesome in the seasons to follow, but for now it seemed like the most predictable and irrelevant arc. Isaac's arc, on the other hand, was awesome, arguably the highlight of the entire season. It's fundamentally a series of conversations as the Forge Master begins the season exiled into a Middle Eastern desert. He moves between interactions, doing his best to be reasonable as he attempts to travel toward the target of his revenge, but is pushed by many of the humans he encounters into embracing his dark side. Isaac's design is a major departure from his model in the game, but the voice actor and the accent he uses are so incredible, it's really hard to have a problem with this choice.
Why do you do that? The whipping.
Discipline. Peace. Choosing my own actions. And inuring myself to a world of horrors.
Both in seasons 2 and 3, Isaac is an evil character who has crystal clear motivations that put him in the much sought after Walter White tier of sympathetic villain. You don't want Isaac to succeed in his quest, but you also sorta do because he's awesome. One rather long conversation in particular has nothing at all to do with the story, but was riveting. Isaac speaks to a bug-eyed monster which he created, who turns out to be inhabited by the soul of an Athenian philosopher who was executed by the church. Not a single whip, sword, or spell is thrown, but I found the story absolutely captivating.
I woke up in hell because this world is insane. And I learned something about sin.
What did you learn?
I learned to like it.
This brings me to what the genius of this show is. It dares to primarily be a character-based drama with thoughtful, high-effort writing, when it so easily could have been a shallow, action-packed show where every episode has a new monster to kill, and most of the Castlevania fandom would have been pretty happy with that. This is where we come to the concept of expectation subversion done right. If you were expecting an entertaining, action-packed fluff show, and instead you get a story which actually has some work put into it, but which still delivers on the action after making you care about the characters and the tension is built, that's the ideal way to give a fandom something incredible. It's clear that a lot of respect is given to the games and the lore, but the Castlevania Netflix series gives you something the games do not, while still containing a hefty amount of fan service that it delivers in key moments. The technical execution is also quite strong. The voice cast is incredibly solid, and I honestly can't think of even a single poor performance. The animation is very detailed, and in the moments when the fight scenes do kick off, it's very aesthetically pleasing, and the music is incredible. There's a moment in the second season when Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard take on a group of vampires in the entryway of the titular castle, and a beautiful orchestral arrangement of the original Castlevania theme kicks in. If you're a fan of the series, it'll give you chills for sure. I kept this video focused on the third season as it's the one which recently released, but before I wrap this up, I should note that the penultimate episode of season 2 has such an incredible and unexpected ending that it alone is worth watching the show for. It has a very Return of the Jedi vibe. If you try the show out and end up liking it, you can find the Castlevania Collection on all major platforms to play all the old school games. The Requiem Collection on PS4 has two of the best games in the series, Rondo of Blood and the masterpiece Symphony of the Night. Symphony of the Night can also be found on iOS and Android for some reason as well, but sadly every other game in the main series has to be played on its original hardware. If you're just a geek and not a gamer and would like to know more about the series and how unbelievably consistent the lore has been over the last 30 years, there are some links to a few decent timeline synopsis videos in the description. Finally, if you are a gamer, subscribe to Gaming with Geeks to hear my sexy voice serenading you with video game reviews and news once a week. For Geeks and Gamers, I'm MarcTheCyborg. Keep your holy water warm, Slayers.